Hello, I'm Maria Barontini, Pastoral Associate for Children's Catechesis at Prince of Peace. Congratulations to all of our First Holy Communion and Confirmation students who received their sacraments last Friday and Saturday. This week, the readings for Sunday, August 9th are 1 Kings chapter 19, verse 9, 11 through 13, Psalm 85, Romans 9, verse 1 through 5, and Matthew 14, verse 22 through 33, the story of Jesus walking on the sea. Let's talk first briefly about 1 Kings chapter 19, verse 9, and then verse 11 through 13. In this story, we hear about Elijah, who was a prophet of the Lord, hiding in a cave. He's fleeing from some people that are trying to catch him. So he's hiding in a cave on the exact same mountain that Moses experienced the divine presence of God in Exodus chapter 19, Exodus 33, Exodus 34, and then Deuteronomy 4. We hear about the same place in all of those Bible verses. We now hear how Elijah stands on the mountain and a strong wind passes by, but the Lord wasn't in the strong wind. Then there is an earthquake, and the Lord was not in the earthquake. Then there's a fire next, but the Lord was not in the fire. Finally, there's a tiny whispering sound. Elijah hears it and hides his face in his cloak, knowing that he's in the presence of God. God's presence could have been in all these huge and mighty things, but he's there in a tiny whisper. The world is a very noisy place. There are all kinds of things that can distract us from God. It's sometimes hard to hear God's voice in the noise of the world. How do we hear God if he's in a tiny whisper when the world is so noisy? Well, we need to listen for God in the silence. We need to take time away from the noise and just be in God's presence. God is always with us. We need to be like Elijah, tuning out the things that are not God and tuning in to God's presence. Take some time to yourself today. Find a quiet spot. Think and pray to God and listen for his whisper. Try and find some time every single day for silence with God. The gospel for this week comes from Matthew 14, verse 22 through 33. Is the story of Jesus walking on the water. Jesus has been teaching a crowd all day long, and he dismisses them, sends the disciples away on a boat, and goes off to the mountain by himself to pray. The boat is a few miles offshore, and the disciples see something moving on top of the water. They think it's a ghost, but it's Jesus. He is walking on top of the water and tells them, "Take courage, it is I, do not be afraid." Peter, being always Peter and brazen, says to Christ, "Lord, if it is you, command me to come to you on the water." Jesus says, "Come." And Peter begins to walk on the water toward Jesus. But when he saw how strong the wind was, he became frightened and begins to sink and said to him, "O you of little faith, why did you doubt?" Why did Peter begin to doubt? Well, we hear in the story that he got distracted by how strong the wind was. Peter's focus was on Jesus when he began to walk on the water. But when he took his eyes off Jesus to look at the fierce wind, he began to sink. We need to learn from Peter not to be distracted by the noise and scary things that surround us. Our focus needs to be on Jesus. And if we do not get distracted by the world, if we do get distracted by the world, then we need to look back toward Christ to refocus on what matters, following Christ and listening to him.